We will, in the Labour Party, always prioritise national security and prioritise our democratic integrity. We do believe that we need to continue to keep all of these matters under review. In fact, if we were elected, we would do a full audit of all UK-China relations to fully understand our exposure to China and indeed give certainty to those businesses who trade with China. But we do support what the government announced yesterday, but we would continue to work on a cross-party basis with them to ensure that the right action is taken in response to any threat to our national security.
The UN Security Council has passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. It was passed after the US abstained from voting, a shift in its position on the conflict, which prompted Israel to cancel a meeting in Washington. It comes as the UK airdrops food supplies into Gaza for the first time, part of international efforts to provide life-saving assistance to civilians. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It's 9:34. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pierce. Thank you for joining us.
Well, is it time to get tough on China? Because if it is, there was no sign of it from the Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden's statement yesterday, knock-kneed and weak, even though the UK and the United States have accused China of launching what they call a prolific global campaign of spying and cyber attacks.
That's right. They targeted the personal information of more than 40 million people. Some of it, of course, is freely available on the electoral roll, but some people choose to stay private. And I think our understanding now has improved a little bit in the last 24 hours, that some people who might have wanted to remain private...
For security reasons, for instance.
That's right.
They'll have access to that.
Some Conservatives are criticising the government's feeble response. The former Conservative Party leader, Ian Duncan-Smith, said this in the House of Commons yesterday.
Whilst I welcome these two sanctions from the government, it is a little bit, this statement, like an elephant giving birth to a mouse. The reality is that in those 3 years, the Chinese have trashed the Sino-British agreement. They have been committing murder and slave labour and genocide in Xinjiang. We have had churches broken and, in Hong Kong, false court cases against Jimmy Lai.
So... Eamon Holmes, I think, kind of hit the nail on the head at breakfast when he was interviewing Jonathan Ashworth and said, this is all about money, isn't it? Nothing will change because we need China for our financial commerce, for our trade with them.
Yeah, and, for instance, they are the biggest supplier of electric cars in the world, and they're about to build a factory here. And, of course, those cars could easily be fitted with devices.
Yeah.
I mean, and think, so what do we want? Do we not want China creating thousands of jobs in this country, or do we? It's a dilemma. And it's one that's not been resolved. And, of course, David Cameron, who's now the Foreign Secretary, he was part of that ludicrous move, in my view, called the Golden Era relations with China. Remember he took the Chinese Premier for a drink in the pub at Chequers?
Yeah. And
we did more and more business. We even allowed China to get involved in our 5G, Huawei, which have now been stripped out. How could we have ever thought that was a good idea?
The other thing that I think is missing from this conversation is actually, and Bob Seeley MP alluded to it yesterday, it's the fact that some MPs are a bit corruptible. They're quite corruptible, and frankly, China will pay a lot of money to people to receive some information. That's worrying in itself.
And are they still engaged in what we call the old-fashioned honey traps?
Yeah. So it is a bit of a mess. And I feel like I feel the analogy that Ian Duncan-Smith used about an elephant giving birth to a mouse, I think what he was talking about is you've got this sort of behemoth of China and you've got us pathetically sort of scrambling around trying to do something.
America haven't done much either, because they do a lot of China. But, of course, you know, the trade deficit between Britain and China is £50 billion, i.e. they flog us all this stuff. We're not selling much to them. It's
not good enough, is it? Well, joining us now is our political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, just fill in any gaps that we've left there in terms of what this story is actually about.
I think you've covered it really well. I think that the concern in the Commons chamber yesterday from Ian Duncan-Smith, who has personally been targeted by the Chinese government for his criticism of the administration in Beijing, is passionate, and he wonders: is this all there is? Two people being sanctioned. I've been talking to senior Labour figures today in Westminster. They're also puzzling. A lot of what we knew yesterday is shocking. Of course, the electoral register, including those private details kept private for security security reasons, given that China got access to in that year after 2021. A lot of this was raised in a report from the Intelligence and Security Committee on China last year, that very little is new. Labour are puzzling about why was David Cameron last night talking to backbench Tory MPs about this, and why wasn't Sir Keir Starmer, other key players on Labour's front bench, given a Privy Council briefing? That didn't happen. Is it a case of party management? Were they meant to be talking about Rwanda this week? Yesterday, today and tomorrow will be the 3 days to get the Rwanda bill through. That hasn't happened, despite the emergency about migration, so they're filling the space with worries about China. Are they being driven by America? Is the UK making a big fuss about China this week because in America they haven't done it yet, so we're giving them some cover? And equally, other issues there in other Five Eyes countries maybe, and they want to raise that too. So there's other things at play here, and the UK response is quite limited, just 2 individuals being sanctioned. Right now, the Cabinet has just started meeting in Downing Street. There's already talk of a Doves-Hawks split. So you've got people like Tom Tugendhat, the Security Minister. He wants to see more action against China. Kevin Badenoch, concerned about Chinese companies being sanctioned in the UK. She wants to make sure that's quite limited. The next space might be they go towards this foreign influence registration scheme, in which would force all Chinese companies to register with the UK government and state what their business is. That might be a way of trying to limit Chinese business links in the UK. But as you both say correctly, we rely on Chinese technology, certainly in electric cars and the like, and we can't really cut off that requirement to rely on them. So, yeah, there's some puzzlement amongst Labour, certainly senior Labour figures, about why the government's made such a big fuss this week and has so little to show for it.
OK, thank you, Chris. We're going to be bringing you any updates on this story into, obviously, the China situation, but we also need to go live now to Baltimore.
Extraordinary.
This is the event that happened at 1:30 a.m. local time in Baltimore here. This is a bridge that was 2.6 kilometres long. It was hit by a cargo ship and it collapsed like a matchstick model,
it really
didn't it?
did.
Into
it just crumpled. And, of course, there were vehicles on the bridge at the time. Mercifully, at 1:30 in the morning, not rush hour, so not packed, but also there were construction workers doing repair work, overnight repair work on the bridge. A number of bodies, a number of vehicles are in the water. And, of course, it's freezing temperatures.
That's right. It's
so
called
there'll be a fear of hypothermia.
It's called the Francis Scott Key Bridge. It's in the American state of Maryland, of course, collided with a container ship, as Andrew said, sending a number of vehicles into the water. The ship appeared to catch fire as part of the bridge appeared to collapse upon it. Loads of smoke, as you can see there to the left of the picture. The boat appears to burst into flames on the impact of the bridge.
So there could be casualties on the boat as well.
That's right.
On the ship.
That's right.
You just wouldn't have expected this to happen in America, because you'd expect it to have been a really solid, well-built bridge.
Yeah.
Clearly been there for decades.
Yeah.
It's metal. It appears to be metal. But if you've heard this had happened in Chile, you'd think, oh, well, you know, sometimes these bridges don't get built quite the same way.
Correct.
Corruption in public
developing
contracts,
country, yeah.
all that sort of stuff. This will become a political issue, I suspect.
Yeah. Well, they're describing it as a mass casualty event at the moment. The Director of Communications of the Baltimore Fire Department has said that there were several vehicles on the bridge at the time, one the size of a tractor trailer, so some huge vehicles. And they've said that their focus right now is trying to rescue people, still trying to recover people who might be in the water, and they're describing it as a developing mass casualty event.
So that happened about sort of 2.5, 3 hours ago. You just think if they're still in the water, the chances of survival, because it will be hypothermic. That would be the problem, because it's freezing cold, grey. It's the middle of the night, of course. It was
the ship, apparently, is a almost 300-metre high Singapore-flagged cargo ship, hit the bridge. It's part of Interstate 695. I don't know how familiar you are with the road network in Baltimore. And it left Baltimore, the boat, at 1 o'clock in the morning, was heading for the Sri Lankan capital of Colombo, according to the maritime data platform Marine Trust.
You literally wonder, were they asleep at the wheel? I mean, how can you miss a bridge that size? And it appeared to collide with one of the supports
Yeah.
of the bridge.
It was actually built in 1977,
Right.
that bridge. So it had obviously been there a long time.
Yeah.
It's apparently a vital route along the port, along with the port of Baltimore. And it's a real hub, apparently, this for the shipping on the US's east coast. And
So that's been there nearly 50 years.
huge, and it will be a catastrophic disruption for that area, for all of the transport in that area for months at least.
We're going to hopefully talk to an engineer to talk about how can a bridge just disintegrate like that. It does. It looks like paper mache.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email, as always. But next, we're going to be talking to the Conservative MP, Philip Davis. You'll know him, GB News contributor and presenter as well. He was confronted by pro-Palestine activists this week. He's going to be in the studio with us next to respond to those claims there on the posters that you can see on the screen that he is a terrorist. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Tubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
You think this country needs new gas power stations. Apparently, this will all be about trying to get some form of energy security. Rishi Sunak has upset people today with this suggestion, people saying that actually this would do more damage to climate change than it would do good. Where are you on it, Richard?
I'll tell you exactly where we need a lot more gas power stations and nuclear power stations because quite often the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Last week, we imported 16% of all our electricity because we haven't got enough capacity in the UK, and we're now totally over-reliant on renewables.
The part of the problem is the lack of storage capacity, which the government has finally got round to addressing. I think this as backup is actually quite a sensible idea. But they are not doing anything, as far as I can tell. At the moment, it will be retrofitted to have storage capability, which seems to be utterly bonkers. I mean, anyone who's got solar panels, you know very well you're storing up energy. So it's about storage as much as production. And they could have gone, 20 years ago, we could have had nuclear power. We could have done more. We haven't looked far enough ahead in the future, and we are in grave danger of making the same mistake. I mean, the other side of this is, what is the difference going to be? Blackouts are, they're irritating and...
Irritating? It'd be disastrous. It would literally destroy our economy.
Well, they would be now, but, some of us remember 3-day weeks and things like that. And in fact, I grew up thinking that everybody had, at least a couple of days a week when they had to eat off a primus stove and things.
This is, again, I don't want to harp on, but this is one of the problems in the politics in our country, isn't it? So many politicians, they just think in election cycles.
Absolutely.
They just think, what can I do and say to get my own backside re-elected at the next general election? They're not always looking ahead. Actually, politics aside, what is genuinely the best thing for this country?
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Tubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. So have we seen another breach of MP's safety? This week, pro-Palestinian activists rallied outside the surgery of our very own Tory MP, Philip Davis, in Shipley. He was, and the protesters there are urging that Phil supports the cause for a ceasefire in Gaza.
So is this putting MPs at risk, or is this part of the job? Well, Philip's in the studio with us. Philip, they can protest every week. Every Saturday in London, we've got these wretched people bringing the city grinding to a halt, but I defend their right to protest. Is it fair game outside your constituency office where your staff are trying to work and people are trying to come to see you with their issues?
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, I did say to them that they could. I didn't care whether there was 10 of them protesting, 100, 100,000, whether they were there every day, every week, every month. It wouldn't change my opinion on anything. I don't change my opinion based on a mob outside my office. So I don't mind that. If they want to do that, they're wasting the time, but they're perfectly entitled to do so. I think the bit that was slightly worrying from my perspective was that actually one of them had made an appointment to come and see me yesterday as a surgery appointment. Saying that she wanted to talk to me about fly tipping.
Right.
And so I'd made an appointment to see her, and she came in, but then came in with 3 other people who sort of came in mob-handed, and they didn't want to talk about fly tipping at all. They wanted to talk about Palestine. And that is a slightly unnerving part of it, because obviously we make surgery appointments for people in good faith and all the rest of it. And obviously she'd sort of lied in... I mean, to be honest, if she'd said to me, I want to come and talk to you about Palestine, I'd been perfectly happy to talk to her about Palestine. She didn't say she wanted to, she didn't need to do that, but she did, and then came in mob-handed with other people trying to sort of video what was going on.
Really?
So I sort of kicked them out.
Did you kick them out, or did you have a conversation?
No, I had a conversation. Then I realised what they were, and I kicked them out. But I went outside to see the demonstrators. Which was quite ironic, because they were chanting "Philip Davis, you can't hide." And I thought, well, I'm not hiding. I'm literally stood here. I think they'd rehearsed it. They'd rehearsed it, not expecting me to go outside to see them. So I think they need to change their lines for new rehearsal. But look, I don't mind. There were some people I recognised there from the constituency. There were a couple there who were perfectly reasonable. I could have a reasonable conversation with, but there were some that were utterly unreasonable. But if they want to do that, so be it.
Do they make you think about a ceasefire, though, in a way that you might not if they weren't on your doorstep?
No, it doesn't change my opinion about anything at all, to be perfectly honest. Obviously, it's a really massive issue. These are things that we think about all the time. I did make the point to them that they had all the placards up there. I didn't see one of them that was an anti-Hamas placard.
No, there never is.
And I'd have a bit more respect if they were equally armed with anti-Hamas placards, but there were none of them to be seen.
And if you raise that with them, what do they say?
Oh, I mean, I'm afraid the fact of the matter is you can't have a rational conversation with them. They're fanatics, and you can't have a sensible debate, and that's the sad part. That's the sad part.
Do you think they were even your constituents?
Well, the person who made the appointment clearly was, because she was on the electoral... I mean, we do check the electoral register to make sure they were real... And so, yes, not all of them, not all of them were, but, yes, some of them... I recognised a couple of them as Labour Party members who were there, so...
oh, really?
So I did notice they were sort of obviously sort of joining in the sort of...
What do you make of the fact now the UN, America abstained, Britain backed it for some form of unconditional ceasefire? I mean, can you just explain where we are now with the ceasefire in the United Nations?
Well, I mean, I'm completely opposed to forcing Israel into a ceasefire, because, in effect, I mean, Hamas don't want a ceasefire. They want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. In effect, a ceasefire is, in effect, asking Israel to unilaterally have a ceasefire to allow Hamas to rearm, regroup, to launch new attacks into Israel. That's completely unacceptable. We wouldn't allow that. If people had attacked us, we wouldn't be agreeing to that, and I don't see why we should allow...
Philip, but it is brutal, the shelling of people in Palestine, children now.
Bev, war's a terrible thing. War is a terrible thing. There's no war where you don't have civilian casualties. Unfortunately, what on earth are Israel expected to do when Hamas launched that attack on them and still wants to keep launching those attacks on them?
But it's disproportionate now, surely. That October the 7th was horrific, chilling, some of the most disturbing footage I've ever watched. But this now, months later, to still be bombarding innocent people trapped in Palestine feels disproportionate.
He does say he's going to go into Rafah, which might be too much for some people, because he says there's still a strong Hamas enclave in Rafah.
I don't know what people expect Israel to do, to be perfectly honest. Israel, it seems to be the only country in the world that gets attacked for being attacked. And I don't really... what would any other country in the world do?
But that's, I suppose, what do they want to do? Because it looks at the moment like they just want to obliterate all residents of Palestine.
No, I think you want to obliterate... The plan is to obliterate Hamas, isn't it?
Andrew Roberts, who's one of our leading historians, made an excellent speech in the House of Lords where he said, even if you take Hamas's figures, the ratio of deaths between activists, military activists of Hamas and civilians is remarkably low, given it's such a built-up area. that Gaza is. I think all the evidence shows that Israel have been doing their best to try and target military activists and not civilians. But of course, it's impossible to do that, particularly when Hamas use civilians and children as human shields in order to protect their military infrastructure. What I'd say is this is on Hamas, it's not on Israel.
And they haven't given up the hostages.
No, exactly.
Let's do a massive gear change if we can. Your wonderful wife, Esther McVey, is on the front page of several papers today. What's she up to? She's trying to fill in the potholes, Phil. Good for her.
She is. The government have given over £8 billion to local authorities out of scrapping HS2, where over £8 billion of that has been given to fill in the potholes. Esther's been getting frustrated that it hasn't been getting done, so she's now started a pothole tour. She started in Lee yesterday, and she got a helmet on and a high-vis jacket, and there she was. She was actually getting...
She's filling them herself.
She was literally getting stuck in filling them.
What did Mrs Thatcher say? If you want something done, you ask a woman.
Ask a busy woman,
exactly. So Esther's very determined about the pot. She's very exercised about this pothole situation.
And one last quick word. Is Nadine Dorries sexy at 66, Philip Davis?
Well, each to their own, isn't it? And I'm sure to many people she is, but perhaps...
What about to you?
Well, perhaps not to me. I'm very happy with Esther, and I
still admire another woman for being sexy. Yes, married.
Well, I do. I probably do, but it probably wouldn't be. Nadine Dorries probably wouldn't be at the top of my list, but I'm sure she's at the top of many people's list.
All right, thank you so much.
You may not surprised.
Surprisingly.
Is she at the top of your list? Do let us know. Up next, find out why the ISIS bride Shamima Begum received a major blow yesterday in terms of returning to this country. Don't go anywhere. This is GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some dry weather around today, but also a swathe of rain pushing its way northwards. And this morning we do have some outbreaks of showery rain across parts of Scotland with a bit of sleet or snow over the higher ground. The brightest weather this morning will be across parts of northern England, the Midlands and into East Anglia. But here it is going to turn cloudier as we go through the day, with a bit of rain pushing in as this swathe of rain across southern parts gradually makes its way northwards as we go through the day. Also some outbreaks of rain across parts of Northern Ireland, and temperatures for many of us will be around or a little bit below average for the time of year, especially across parts of Scotland. A bit of a chilly feel here. As we go through the end of the day, the wet weather across much of England will feed further northwards, so a pretty wet end to the day across northern England, and then a wet night for much of Scotland. And as that rain hits the high ground over the Highlands, the Grampians, we are likely to see some further hill snow. Something a bit clearer following in behind, so temperatures taking a bit of a dip, many places falling to low to mid single figures. But quite a few places waking up to a bright start on Wednesday, particularly across central parts of England. However, towards western areas, southwestern parts, here we will have some heavy blustery showers. Could have a bit of thunder mixed in with these as they gradually make their way northeastwards. Temperatures again around average for the time of year, perhaps a little bit below, but it is going to be a touch milder than today for many of us, albeit quite blustery at times. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be a winner just like Phil?
Obviously, whoever wins it next is going to be as happy as I was, and they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
Enter our massive spring giveaway. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Can the Church of England not spend their money as they wish? The Church of England can do amazing things for this country and for the world, and I'm not sure why it's chosen to focus on this specific issue. You know, one of the causes that I've always thought the Church was very good at were things called almshouses, which were basically houses that would be built on church estates for the needy. Not only did they want to spend £100 million on this fund, that they wanted to spend £1 billion on reparations as well. Well, why not spend 100 million or £1 billion on a new generation of almshouses, as opposed to just helping one group of people, black British people? Why not just help all people in need?
Alex? Well, I just don't understand what the Church of England is trying to do. It's on its deathbed.
Congregations have reduced. I mean, deathbed is maybe a little bit...
Look, if we look over 20 years, it's dramatically lower than it used to be. And a lot of criticism from actual Christians come from the values that the Church of England are now propagating. And Justin Welby has a lot to answer for, because, you know, not only are we seeing in the news there's mass conversion of illegal immigrants to a gay mass system in the UK, but now we're seeing them spending money... And as Albie actually pointed out correctly, in a way that doesn't really benefit broader society, it benefits a very small group of people. So I just don't know where it's going to end. This committee has also said £1 million's not enough. It's 100 million, sorry.
Church commissioners are now hoping for a target of £1 billion.
I mean, it's woke nonsense, isn't it?
You could make the argument that this is charity. Justin Welby's job is to be a virtue signaller, is it not?
Charity discriminate? I mean, that's what he's saying. We're only going to give this to people from a specific skin colour or background. I don't think that's very Christian of them.
10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 26th of March. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Extraordinary scenes in Baltimore where a bridge has collapsed. The bridge in the US city of Baltimore entirely disintegrated after being hit by a container ship. Casualties in the water.
That's right. We're looking at live pictures now in Baltimore whilst the search operation goes on for at least 7 people as the sun starts to rise over there imminently. We're going to be talking to Mark White, who will have the very latest.
And defeat for the ISIS bride. Why am I smiling? Shamima Begum has lost her latest attempt to challenge the removal of her British citizenship. She wanted to take it to the Supreme Court. Is this the final? Good riddance.
And toilet training failure. We're going to reveal how many children are turning up to school not knowing how to use the toilet. That's right. Should children be banned from going to school if they still wear nappies? Would that focus the minds of the parents?
66 and sexy, that's how the former Secretary of State for Culture, Nadine Dorries, describes herself. She's told us why so many men find her sexy and desirable. Do you?
Get in touch with us this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. A lot more to get through between now and midday. First, though, your very latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. First to the developing situation in Baltimore, where a state of emergency has now been declared after a bridge collapsed early this morning. If you're watching us on TV, you can see this video showing the moment a cargo ship crashed into the bridge. It happened at around 1:30 in the morning. The Singapore-flagged container ship is to the left of your screen. You can see it hit one of the bridge's foundations, with the structure plummeting into the water. Quite extraordinary scenes. We can take you live now to Baltimore, where it's just after 5 o'clock in the morning. Rescue efforts are continuing. Reports suggest that some vehicles fell into the water. Officials are now trying to locate up to 20 people. We'll bring you more on this developing story as we get it. Britain and the United States are accusing China of carrying out a global campaign of malicious cyber attacks. It's an unprecedented move, with Britain publicly blaming China for targeting the Electoral Commission watchdog and the email accounts of MPs and peers. British intelligence services believe that Chinese spies are likely to use hacked information to target critics of Xi Jinping's government. The United States charged 7 of the alleged hackers yesterday. Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth told GB News a full review of China's relationship with Britain is needed.
We will, in the Labour Party, always prioritise national security and prioritise our democratic integrity. We do believe that we need to continue to keep all of these matters under review. In fact, if we were elected, we would do a full audit of all UK-China relations to fully understand our exposure to China and indeed give certainty to those businesses who trade with China. But we do support what the government announced yesterday, but we would continue to work on a cross-party basis with them to ensure that the right action is taken in response to any threat to our national security.
The UN Security Council has passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. It was passed after the US abstained from voting, a shift in its position on the conflict, which prompted Israel to cancel a meeting in Washington. It comes as the UK airdrops food supplies into Gaza for the first time, part of international efforts to provide life-saving assistance to civilians. The Education Secretary says parents are having to fight for the right support for school children who have special needs. Around 2 in 3 schools for children with special needs in England were at or over capacity in the last academic year. The Department for Education says councils will benefit from an £850 million cash boost. Unions say the plans don't appear to differ from previously announced commitments. But Gillian Keegan says the government's plan will see 60,000 more places made available for students and families.
Be more workforce being trained as well, educational psychologists, Senkos, etc. So there's a lot of things in the plan. But this specifically is looking at more places. With the council pressures, we have increased this sort of high needs budget to pay for this part of their budget to 10.5 million. So that's actually gone up 60% in the last 5 years to cope with that increased demand. But we also have 2 programmes to work with councils delivering better value and safety valve.
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, better known as Puff Daddy or P. Diddy, has had 2 of his properties raided by federal agents as part of an ongoing sex trafficking investigation. Properties in the Los Angeles and Miami were searched by officers yesterday. It's after accusations made by his former partner, R&B singer Cassandra Ventura, better known as Cassie. The 54-year-old has been subject of several lawsuits in recent months, including for sexual assault. He's denied all of the allegations. The High Court is to decide whether Julian Assange can mount a final appeal challenging his extradition to the United States. It's over an alleged conspiracy to obtain and disclose national defence information following the publication of leaked documents relating to the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. Protesters have been gathering over recent weeks in support of Mr. Assange. A decision is expected shortly. And pizza chain Papa John's has announced plans to downsize its business, closing 43 underperforming shops. The takeaway business has undergone a review into its profitability and plans to increase investment in research and technology. The company hasn't confirmed how many staff will be impacted by the closures. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
It's 10:06. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. You're looking at your screen there for this breaking news.
It's extraordinary. We're back to Baltimore, where a bridge collapsed just a few hours ago after it was struck by a heavy cargo ship. If you're listening on the radio, it just disintegrated like it was made of matches. Extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it.
This is the footage here from 1:30 in the morning. Maryland governor has declared a state of emergency and the authorities say they're facing a race against time to rescue people in the water amid freezing temperatures in Baltimore. Let's talk now to Mark White, our Home Security editor, who's bringing us with the latest. What more do we know from these shocking images, Mark?
Well, it's certainly clear that there is a terrible tragedy that's unfolding in Chesapeake Bay on the Patasko River. It was 1:30 in the morning when this container ship, the container ship Dali, which was going to be assigned to Maersk on their route to Sri Lanka, had just left the container shipping port in Baltimore. For those that don't know, Baltimore is a massive container port there. Lots of these huge vessels in and out of the Pataska River every day. This vessel had left, it was about 30 minutes, I should say, out of port, heading away from Baltimore. There is some images that hopefully we'll be able to bring you soon that show this container ship in the minutes before the collision with the central span of this bridge. The lights go out on the container ship. Now, that might indicate a power failure. If it did suffer a power failure, clearly its propulsion's going to go down, and then it's really...
it could have drifted into the...
Yeah, absolutely. It's basically then going to be carried by the currents on the river, and that may well have been what took it into that central span. But really, the extraordinary images of the collision of this vessel, it is an enormous vessel, and it would have caused massive damage to that span. But then for the whole of the bridge, it seems, to just lose its structural integrity and collapse into the river. It's just incredible. Normally you see a bridge struck, you might get a central span off the bridge that collapses into the river, and then vehicles on either side of that collapse are okay. But literally every vehicle that was on that bridge will have ended up in the water.
And there's talk of 20 people. There were apparently people doing maintenance work on the bridge as well when the ship struck. Have we ever seen a bridge collapse quite so quickly?
I've never heard of a whole bridge collapse like this. Partial bridge collapses are not uncommon. Ships colliding with bridges are not uncommon either. But for it to end up in this kind of devastating result of complete loss of structural integrity is incredible.
It's been a landmark in Baltimore for nearly 50 years.
Yes, absolutely. Named after the man who composed the US national anthem, the Stars and Stripes. The Key Bridge, it's known as locally, 1.6 miles long, so it's a massive bridge over this very busy river, which is, as I say, a main shipping lane as well. And you mentioned there construction workers. That's not uncommon, of course, for these massive big bridges anywhere around the world. At night, when it's quieter, that's when you'll get construction workers going up onto bridges and carrying out the routine maintenance that needs to be carried out on a daily basis on these big structures. So 20, we believe, construction workers were up on the bridge and ended up in the river. It's 9 degrees Celsius in the river at the moment. You're not going to be in the river for long before you're suffering the effects of the cold, hypothermia. It's pitch black, plunged from quite a height into that river. The chances of survival are going to be, I would imagine, fairly slight.
A mass casualty event.
Yeah.
There is some speculation on social media at the moment that Baltimore has an infrastructure budget which has been massively underinvested in, and that it has the lowest figure of any city in Maryland. If that's the case, Mark, there are going to be questions.
This is going to become a...
Well, there is absolutely no doubt. I mean, structural engineers and those in authority will want to know why on earth the collision into a central, a central structure on the bridge caused this complete collapse of the bridge, and not just a partial collapse. We're told that the mayor, the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, has now declared a state of emergency, what they call mutual aid, which is emergency services from all of the surrounding counties are being brought in to help. In particular, what they'll need is specialist water rescue teams and the divers that can get in there, because in addition to the 20 construction workers who we believe were on the bridge and ended up in the water, there were lots of vehicles on. OK, not as many vehicles as you would get during the day, but it's still a major arterial route up to Philadelphia, to New York and New Jersey. So even at 1:30 in the morning, there would have been multiple vehicles on that bridge.
They're going to have to check other bridges which do similar design, similar structure, throughout the United States.
Yeah, I mean, if this is an inherent flaw or weakness in the design of these bridges, then clearly there's very significant implications for safety going forward.
Massive implications.
Yeah.
I mean, this was built in 1977, so it's been a landmark for all that time.
Yeah.
And you just wondered, was it an accident waiting to happen for a long time?
Wow. We know that, you know, the safety of these vessels is enhanced by the fact that on these busy shipping routes through the rivers, you have what are called pilots. They're experienced skippers, effectively, who take over control of the vessel. And we're told that there were 2 pilots on this particular container ship. They know the river inside out, so they are never going to make the kind of mistake that ends up with that vessel hitting a major structure on that bridge. So I think this loss of power potential scenario seems to kind of ring true, especially if we can get the pictures at some point that show the lights on that vessel going out in the minutes before the collision.
I'm sort of surprised to realise that you can lose the power on a boat like that and not be able to return it to human control. You'd think you would have something that would override it. I realise it's not as simple as turning the steering wheel. I get that, but
they wouldn't be able to
but you are dependent, therefore, on your technology systems working at 100%.
So you need the propellers on the ship to propel it forward, and that's what gives you the ability to steer. If you're on a river, especially if there is quite a fast-moving current on a river, your power and propulsion stops, then you are just at the mercy of that river and where the current is taking you.
Like a car.
Doesn't matter how you steer it.
And it's not like a car where you slam on the brakes.
Yeah, exactly.
This is absolutely extraordinary.
OK, thank you, Mark. We'll be bringing you more news from the ground there in Baltimore as we get it. Still to come this morning, though, Shamima Begum. She had a resounding defeat yesterday. You are delighted.
I am delighted. She's ghastly and she should stay where she is. She's made her jihadi bed and she can lie on it.
I see it slightly differently to that. This is Britain's Newsroom on GBNews.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Yeah, well, when it comes to fish and chips, we all know they're a part of a British tradition, and the Golden Chippy is an award-winning restaurant, and for years they've been serving the community here in Greenwich, and even today on a Sunday they are fully packed today. But this is the issue. Here we've got a mural and which says a great British meal. Residents who live in this area who've complained to Greenwich Council, who say it's inappropriate considering it's in a conservation area. Here's what some of the local people we've been speaking to had to say.
What's wrong with it? It looks all right, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? Look at some left graffiti they've got around in Greenwich. They don't want to take that down, do they? But when you've got something like this was half decent, they want to remove it.
Fantastic artwork. I really like it. Reminds me of Banksy.
Well, those are the views here from people who live in this local area. But I'm kindly joined by Chris, the owner. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. You've been here for 20 years now. Tell me how this issue has come up.
They take pictures. It's only been up for about a month. And it's been very, very popular. I don't want to believe that any of the locals are complaining that this is too loud or anything like that. They say it needs planning permission. How a little thing like this needs planning permission, I don't know.
Are you working with an artist in this local area?
I've got a local guy that does murals, so he said, would you like me to do something for you? I said, yes, why not? I said, make sure you leave a bit of space for people to stand there so they can take some selfies or pictures or whatever they want to do from Golden Chippy. And it's been extremely popular, and not one person has come to me and said, that looks terrible. So I cannot imagine the person that complained about this. I think it's just council.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion, Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
(10:18), you're with Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, Shamima Begum, remember her, the ISIS bride? She's had her latest appeal to challenge the removal of her UK citizenship rejected.
She's hoping to go to the Supreme Court, but she's been blocked from doing that by appeal court judges. She can now apply herself, but she's getting rebuffed at every step by the legal process, and frankly, I'm glad. Would you want to live living next door to you?
I don't know. Honestly...
Because can she be de-radicalised?
I don't know. I sort of...
Well, it's too big a risk, then.
The only thing I think about this is I have got a 15-year-old daughter. And 15-year-old girls think they know everything. And 15-year-old girls don't know anything. And 15-year-old girls are vulnerable and easy and open to abuse. And when she went to ISIS, she was 15. She was a baby. And so my feeling is, of course, did she do some hideous things out there? Yes. Are there questions over the death of her 3 babies? Yes, I actually think there are. But do we live in a country which will have her back to face justice here? I think we do.
Well,
I think that's what we should do.
I just don't trust her. I don't think I could ever trust her. And if you remember when she was first interviewed by The Times, or was it ITN, who found her in that refugee camp, she was unrepentant. She's changed her story because she wants to now get back to Britain.
Well, I know most of you at home will agree with Andrew on this. I'm sure of it. But I just wonder what's really happened here.
And they would have to spend an absolute fortune keeping her under watch 24/7. Absolute fortune.
I'd like to see her in court, though. I want to hear what she's got to say. I want to hear what motivated her. I want to hear who influenced her. I want to hear what was happening in the classrooms at the schools that she was in.
Or was she on the dark net?
Or was she on the dark net? Quite. Well, joining us now is human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan. Good morning, Shoaib. So, obviously, this is the final hurdle, if we've understood this correctly, from a legal point of view for Shamima Begum. Can she appeal this again, or is that it now? She will never have British citizenship again?
Hi, morning. Yes, she can appeal it further. So, I mean, obviously, this is an appeal to the Supreme Court. She's trying to get the Supreme Court to hear her case. So the way it works is, as in most legal appeals in the UK, you first go to the lower court, who actually made the decision you want to appeal. You ask them for permission to appeal to the higher court. If they refuse, you can go directly to the higher court and request them to hear your case. So it's the same thing that happened here. Obviously, just a few weeks ago, the Court of Appeal dismissed her case. So she applied to the Court of Appeal asking, can I please go to the Supreme Court? The appeal judges refused. But now she does have a chance to approach the Supreme Court directly and ask for permission to appeal to them.
And on what basis has she had this latest appeal rejected?
I think it is going to have been, some very technical grounds, which is basically, I think it's just the Court of Appeal judges saying we made the right decision. So obviously any legal appeal is made on the basis that the last judge or the last panel of judges that made the decision got it wrong. Obviously, if she went to the Supreme Court, that would be her argument. But in this case, the Court of Appeal itself said, no, we've looked at our judgment again. We think it's legally sound. We made the right decision. And as we saw what that judgment basically said, it basically said, as with most matters relating to national security, public policy, and so on, and particularly counter-terror cases, and specifically, like in this case, decisions that the Secretary of State has made herself or himself, judges are very, very reluctant to interfere with that. Judges basically defer to the government and say, it's a matter of national security, intelligence. You have all the intelligence. You know what's happening. So, we're going to have to defer to you. So that's basically what the Court of Appeal said here as well.
So the Court of Appeal judges, there were 3 of them. They were unanimous in ruling that she should not does not have a case to come back here.
Yes, they were. But that's the thing. I mean, basically, like I said, the main thing is they were deferring, as we have seen, from the very first judgment in this case, which was to SIAC, the Special Immigration Appeals Commission. There as well, the judges, most of the points, most of the arguments she has been making, or her lawyers have been making in court, The court just says we can't deal with this. This is a matter of national security, public policy, counter-terrorism. The intelligence services have all the information. We can't really interfere with that, which I think is, it's wrong. Either it's just wrong and it shouldn't be that way, or if that's the way it's going to be, there's no point of having legal appeals then. If judges are just going to say the government has made a decision, we can't interfere, then what's the point of why are we just spending so much money doing this? When the Home Secretary, I think Sajid Javid at the time, the day he signed the document saying you are no longer British, that should have been it then. There's no point dragging it along, and judges just year after year keep saying we can't interfere, we can't interfere.
Sure, but if she's a threat to national security, she's a threat to national security, so why on earth would you think she should come back to Britain? Would you want her living next door to you?
Personally, I wouldn't mind her living next door to me, I'm sure. I mean, I have no idea who lives next door to me. I'm sorry?
I bet your neighbours wouldn't agree.
Well, some might not, but that's the whole point, isn't it? That's why we're not voting for it. That's a matter of, and that's the whole point. We shouldn't be making law or changing law or applying law according to each case. The whole point is I disagree with the revocation of citizenship, full stop. I think it's barbaric. I think it's some sort of medieval punishment where, people drive him to the end of the village or send him into exile. What does this even mean? She was British, born in the UK. She might be conniving, cunning, a terrorist, a criminal, the worst person ever, but she's a British conniving, cunning criminal. That's the whole point. She went there, and she should be allowed back.
And she was trying to bring down everything this country stands for by joining IS, a medieval, murderous cult. She did terrible things when she was out there. When she was first interviewed, Joe, she showed no repentance or contrition whatsoever.
And those
She's
are
changed
exactly
her tune
the
now.
people
She wants to get back.
And our prisons are full of such people. I mean, believe me when I say that as a lawyer, that's what we do. I mean, that's what people are like, and there's so many of them. We don't take away their passport and send them to a refugee camp in Syria. And that's the whole point. When she went there, she was British. She is still British, should still be British. When her children were born, she was still British, so the children were British. The whole point is, however she acted, those were 3 British children who died. At some point, we have to be, recognizing this. She is our responsibility. She might be a terrorist, but she's a British terrorist.
Just very quickly, if she came back, could she go to court here? And if so, what would she be charged with?
So, I mean, that's a matter of the CPS, obviously, but I think that's the whole problem. Because we all say things, just like Andrew was saying, she's done some terrible things. No one knows what she's actually done. That's the whole point. Other than being in Syria, what do we know? And that's what the government is too lazy to actually find out. We've got intelligence there. We have, criminal justice partners in Syria all around. Investigate, find out what she did. If we have the evidence, try her. That's what we do with the worst criminals.
All right. Thank you, Shoaib. Good to hear from you, as always, human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan there.
She's got one last try to go to the Supreme Court. I guess if she fails that, she could even try to go to the European Court. And if the European Court was to overturn, to let her back, that would be the final straw.
And let's be honest, it is a political decision as well. Because if this Conservative government allowed her to come home, the outcry, absolute outcry.
I remember Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has said before, as an ex-human rights lawyer, that she should come back. I think she can't be trusted, she can't be de-radicalised, and she can stay where she is. Good.
Right, what do you think? GBviews at gbnews.com. Let's go live now to Baltimore, where, if you're just tuning in, an enormous bridge, 2.5 kilometres long. It's the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. It collapsed early this morning. It was hit by a cargo ship. Maryland governor has declared a state of emergency, or the authorities say they're facing a race against time to rescue people from the water amid the freezing temperatures in Baltimore. This is the live footage here. We're going to be listening in to the press conference on the ground there in Baltimore. Here we go.
Am I ready? Okay, good morning. My name is Chief James Wallace. I'm the chief of the Baltimore City Fire Department. I'm joined this morning by our Mayor Brandon Scott, Council President Mosby, Councilwoman Porter, County Executive Johnny Oshevsky, and Baltimore County Fire Chief Joanne Rund. Our brief this morning will be an update on the search and rescue operation that's ongoing at this point. So at approximately 0140 hours this morning, our 911 center dispatched a call to the Baltimore City Fire Department for reportable water rescue in the Patapsco River in the area of the Key Bridge. As units were responding, they began to receive numerous calls indicating multiple people in the water. At some point during that chain of events of calls, we began to receive indications that a ship may have struck the Key Bridge. We got further information through multiple calls that the Key Bridge, portions of the Key Bridge had actually collapsed. At about 0150 hours, our first unit arrived on scene and reported a complete collapse of the Key Bridge. We were also given information at that time that there were likely multiple people on the bridge at the time of the collapse, and that as a result, multiple people were in the water. We were able to remove 2 people from the water. One individual refused service and refused transport. Essentially, that person was not injured. However, there was another individual that's been transported to a local trauma center that is in very serious condition. At this time, we have multiple air assets from the Maryland State Police, as well as the Baltimore Police Department, as well as multiple Marine assets from around the region, including Baltimore City, Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, as well as multiple local and state police agencies, National Resources Police, BPD Special Ops Unit is in here, Maryland State Police is here. We have multiple resources. We are still very much in an active search and rescue posture at this point, and we will continue to be for some time. We have a large area that we have to search. This includes on the surface of the water, subsurface, as well as on the deck of the ship itself. We believe at this point we may be looking for upwards of 7 individuals. That's the latest information we have. However, what I will say is the information that I'm giving you right now is as of right now. That's what we know right now. This is a very large incident. It involves a very large footprint. Multiple agencies are operating, therefore information is subject to change as we get more intel and as our crews work through the morning. Over the next 8 to 12 hours, you can expect to continue to see our air and maritime assets functioning out on the water and in the air above. We need to do damage assessment of the ship itself before we can board that ship. And we need to continue our subsurface search, which is including different types of sonar. We have side scan sonar, we have other sonar capabilities here. We have underwater UAVs that we're working with. And throughout the night, we've also been working with infrared technology, both from the air and on the water surface. So I'm going to wrap up here with just saying this continues to be a search and rescue operation. It continues to be a very dynamic operation with multiple local, state, and federal resources involved. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our Mayor, Mayor Brandon Scott.
Thank you, Chief. Everyone, this is a unthinkable tragedy. We have to first and foremost pray for all of those who are impacted, those families. Pray for our first responders and thank them, all of them working together, city, state, local, to make sure that we are working through this tragedy. This is an ongoing active research that we're having right now. We're going to continue, as you heard from Chief Wallace, throughout. As long as we have to be doing that, we will do it. But we have to be thinking about the families and people impacted, folks who we have to try to find and save. This is what our focus should be on right now. And we're going to continue to work in partnership with every part of government to do everything that we can to get us through the other side of this tragedy. And with that, I'll turn it over to County Executive Olszewski.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. I think we all awoke this morning to an unspeakable tragedy. As the mayor indicated, we know that there will be families and individuals impacted by this, regardless of what happens the rest of the way out. So I would just echo the mayor in lifting up prayers for those who are impacted, but also ask that our residents pray for our first responders. They have been on scene since very early in the morning, not only conducting initial search and rescue operations, but planning for additional ones as the sun comes up. And The work that they do cannot be understated, and I want to just thank them for all that they are doing and will do in the hours and days ahead. We know that we have a long road ahead, not just in the search and rescue, but in the fallout following this. I think we appropriately have our attention on the search and rescue efforts currently, and just here alongside our partners in the city to say that they have our full support, just as we want to thank our state partners for the resources they've offered up, as well as the federal partners who have already reached out. The mayor and I have talked to the governor. We've heard from the Secretary of Transportation. So collectively, we thank everyone for their thoughts, their well wishes. But again, this is a very active situation, and we want to just thank the chief and our teams for all the great work they're doing. And with that, I'll turn things back over to the chief.
Thank you, County Executive Olszewski. We're going to do some Q&A right now. Now we're just going to go around, have everyone present one question.
Chief, can you tell us where the crew of the ship is? You also mentioned, too, that 2 people were rescued. Who made the first 911 call? And there were reports that it was a crew on the deck of the ship working at that point. Can you confirm any of that information?
The latest information we have on the crew of the ship is that they are still on board the ship. There's been comms between the ship crew and the Coast Guard. So as part of the overall operation, we communicate through the Coast Guard with the ship. And I'm sorry, your other questions?
There were 2 people taken. Who made the first 911 call?
I don't know who made that call yet.
Okay, and were there other workers on the deck of the ship or deck of the bridge at this point? We had heard that information. Can you confirm that?
We were being told there were workers on the bridge. We have yet to confirm that. We'll work with MDTA to obviously to get that information.
About how many cars were on that ship? Last question. On the deck of the bridge at the time it collapsed. You don't know?
Don't have a number. I can tell you our sonar has detected the presence of vehicles submerged in the water. I don't have a count of that yet.
Thank you.
Chief, you mentioned upwards of 7 individuals that you're looking for. We've heard reports of as many as 20 individuals. Can you just paint a more clear picture of about how many people actually fell into the water, how many people you might be looking to rescue, and also if you can give an idea of how many vehicles, although you might not have the answer, but really just the search and rescue mission?
Yeah, I'll start with the last one. So I don't know how many vehicles yet. I know that we have detected the presence of vehicles. As far as the number between the 7 and 20, that's been a dynamic count throughout the morning, just given the fact that we haven't yet nailed that number down. We do believe that at least 7 are involved in that, at least 7 at this point.
That fell into the water?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I know you said the crew was accounted for according to the Coast Guard on deck. Do we know if any of the crew members were part of these at least 7 people that may have been in the water?
We do not.
Can I just ask, survivability in waters around these temperatures is not very long. At what point do you shift focus to become more of a salvage operation?
So we'll be guided by our dive teams. We will determine what the temperature of the water is. The other issue that we have out there is this water is current influenced. So right now we think the tide is coming back in. That adds a bit of a challenge to us also. We can certainly dive in these conditions, but we have to take a lot of factors into play, right? The fact that there may be trauma involved, they have been in the water an extended period of time, but also remember we're battling darkness. So, it's quite possible that we may have somebody there that we've not seen yet, and as they work closer to the debris field, they'll obviously make those determinations. But we're going to rely on the experts, which are our dive masters that are here, our dive team, to tell us when they believe we've reached that non-survivability point.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Janine?
Chief Wallace, was there any indication that there was a problem on the ship? Was it led in by tugboats at any point? Was there any mayday? Like anything that can, so far early on, point you to something went wrong?
We do not have that information with regard to the investigation. I would refer that to law enforcement. My focus since 1:40 this morning has been that rescue operation.
So far there's been no indication that any kind of like an emergency dispatch came from that ship beforehand?
I have no information about that, ma'am.
Have you been able to talk to the pilot, the American pilot on that bridge?
The pilot on the vessel?
Yeah.
We have not talked to the pilot on the vessel. The rescue personnel, the rescue operation, we have not interacted.
Just back over here.
What can you tell us about the victims that were pulled from the water? Man, woman.
I don't have age and
Sorry, again.
I'm sorry.
Update on the condition as well.
Yeah, I don't have age and gender on either. One patient refused service, right? Really, they weren't injured. The second patient, however, was seriously injured and is at an area trauma center.
Are you including them in the at least seven people?
We don't know yet if they're part of that 7. Okay. The patient is injured severely enough that we've not been able to debrief that patient.
That 7 number, did that come from people witnessing cars going down? Like,
So if you're just joining us, the journalists at the press conference here in Baltimore are quizzing the fire chief on the casualty
that we got
numbers
as we were arriving on the scene. That number, and that number again, as I said earlier, has fluctuated. Right, that 7 has been a consistent number.
How many agencies are here assisting right now?
How many agencies are
Oh, wow.
assisting? That lady's just asked.
Yeah, dozens. I mean, locally, fire department wise, Baltimore County's here, Howard County's here, Hartford was here, PG was here, Anne Arundel, of course, Baltimore City, and a lot of those agencies are here by virtue of the fact that they may have specialized equipment that we need during an incident like this. So we're bringing in the equipment specific to the operation right now, and then even law enforcement agencies have a lot of the same marine ops equipment as we do. So given the incident is so big, we try to force multiply and just bring as many resources in as we can so that we can really blanket a large area for a search.
What about the fuel spill? What kind of resources are you bringing in to mitigate that?
We've not been able to confirm that we actually have an active fuel spill from the vessel. We've had odors of diesel fuel. The Maryland Department of the Environment is here, as well as the Coast Guard, so they would take leads on that as well. We hope as the sun comes up a little bit with the air assets that are up to get a much better picture, if we do have a fuel spill, what the impact has been so far.
Talk about the air assets that are up as the daylight comes up. How's that going to impact that with those resources?
Yeah, Maryland State Police has been here. Foxtrot is also working this. There are 2 air resources right now. I don't know that we won't bring any more in, but right now they're the 2 primary. Air reconnaissance on something on the open water it's an invaluable resource. And we've been very fortunate to have it because as we put people out in the dark on the water to conduct searches, they have that degree of overwatch from those assets. So it's been an invaluable resource for us.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Executive, we're talking about search and rescue. I know that, and that's where the focus is right now. I was awakened to this news. We're all awakened to this news. I've seen the video. What do you make of the totality of this incident? What are you thinking about what you've seen and what this community's experienced?
Saying, obviously, we're talking about search and rescue, but do they have an assessment of what might have happened? This is the mayor of Baltimore that we're looking at now, Brandon Scott.
That you would physically see the Key Bridge tumble down like that. It looked like something out of an action movie. And you just think about, most importantly, which is what we all should be thinking about right now, nothing but those families and people that are impacted, and those people who are risking their lives right now from not just Baltimore City and Baltimore County, but all over this state to try to save lives. That should be our focus, the preservation of life, because no one wants to see that happen, let alone someone in their family, someone that they know be injured in an incident like this.
We'll take 2 more questions.
Your thoughts about what this community is experiencing this morning.
Look, I think that folks are stunned. I think folks are reeling. And I think that's particularly true for people who are worried about their loved ones right now. I think there'll be plenty of time to talk about what this bridge means to the community, what it means for commerce, but at the end of the day, right now this is about the humanity of people who are impacted and the men and women who are out there trying to save lives and recover folks off the bridge. So I think there'll be plenty of opportunity to talk about that, but really right now and for the foreseeable hours ahead, this is really about focusing on the search and rescue efforts. And I want to just again thank the Chief for his leadership and for all of the affiliated partners that we have working on this.
Chief,
Chief, the two
Chief,
people...
I know there's the fact that this could have been intentional, that this could be some kind of act of terrorism or intentional.
Whether this could have been intentional.
That's not my focus here, ma'am. That's part of the law enforcement investigations. I would defer to the proper authorities for that.
And actually, can I ask, we saw something similar to this happen in Philly when 95 came, a portion of that came down. I know you said that you guys have spoken to Secretary of Transportation, I'm assuming Buttigieg. Has he made any comment about the assistance like we saw in Philly being rushed through to get this taken care of?
No, thank you. I spoke with Secretary Buttigieg directly. He and his team said that they're going to obviously work with us throughout this incident and work with not just the city and county, but really the state of Maryland to make sure that we have every resource that he and the federal government can provide.
How long is it going to take to rebuild this, Mayor?
I think right now, sir, listen, we shouldn't even be having that discussion right now. The discussion right now should be about the people, the souls, the lives that we're trying to save. There will be a time to discuss about a bridge and how we get a bridge back up. But right now, there are people in the water that we have to get out, and that's the only thing we should be talking about.
Well,
to go back to the question about the terrorism, there is absolutely no indication that there's any terrorism, that this was done on purpose. Our criminal intel is working with the FBI and other federal and state agencies to get all the intel that we have, but there's absolutely no indication that it was intentional.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, I want to thank you all. I will be advising you, updating you on the next briefing. Could be in a couple hours.
OK, so that draws the press conference to an end there. That was Mayor Brandon Scott of Baltimore. He's only 39 years old, Democratic.
He looked in a state of shock.
A Democrat mayor. Absolutely huge issue on his desk this morning. Baltimore are 4 hours behind us, so it's 6:44 in the morning. You could just see the sun start to come up there behind the trees in the background. And Mark White is still with us here. A lot of emphasis there, despite the journalist questions, Mark, on the fact that the people... And one of the contributors there used the word humanity. Right now, it's about the humanity of the people affected. One of the journalists saying, how long will it take to rebuild the bridge? That feels a bit premature.
It is, because what they're saying is at the moment, this is still an active search and rescue operation, although you've got to really wonder what the chances of anybody being in the water at 9 degrees Celsius lasting a particularly long period of time would be. It's possible because there are big... structures in the bridge, part of the bridge in the water and sticking out. Have people been able to clamber onto that and get themselves out of the water around the columns, maybe to get ashore? You just never know.
Sorry, I was just going to say, the bit that really struck me there, 56 metres high, this bridge. Yeah. One of the people that ended up in the water, presumably having fallen 56 metres, was able to walk away from the riverbank and didn't go and get hospital treatment.
And because another person as well, as you say, 56 metres, that other person who ended up in the water is seriously ill, being treated for their injuries. They are working on the theory that 7 people at the moment are in the water. We'd heard it could be as many as 20. They've revised that down, but with the caveat, it could well increase again. And there's a little bit of uncertainty here, but we think the 7 individuals in the water are not related to those that might have been in vehicles, because there are multiple vehicles that were on the bridge that ended up in the water as well. They've said that they've been able to deploy sonar into the river, and they've detected multiple vehicles down on the river bed.
Which again could mean the casualty rate could multiply, because the likelihood is they're trapped. They were trapped in the vehicle.
If we look at this footage, Mark, tell us what's happening here.
You can see the ship there. This has been sped up, but for a while that ship, the lights went out on that ship. And I think that really points to the possibility of there being a power failure on board the cargo vessel, and again the power goes out there.
And the smoke at the back.
Yeah, each time it does that, then obviously then the cargo ship, the container ship, is just drifting on the currents of the river, and that obviously the currents have taken it towards that central column there, colliding with the column. This is a huge vessel, 300 metres long, packed with all of these containers, so a lot of weight behind that. That clearly demolished the column, and you can see the resulting effect was a complete loss in structural integrity for this bridge, which resulted in the whole of the bridge collapsing.
This is a monster of a bridge, Mark, 1.6 miles long. Now, if you could think about our own Severn Bridge, it takes us into Wales, that's barely a mile long. This is a huge bridge.
It doesn't quite look the same, but it's a similar type of construction to the Forth Rail Bridge.
Which is a similar length too.
Yeah, over the River Forth in Scotland. And that, as you say, is a similar length. So a similar design, that was built in the
1882.
1882, that's the only example of that in the UK, of that type of bridge. But there are others around the world, and clearly structural engineers will be looking at these bridges now to see whether this is an inherent weakness in the design.
Yeah, and my political antennae starts ticking immediately, thinking, is there now going to be a major row over maintenance of the bridge? Was there reports warning there potential problems with the bridge? There were people working on the bridge overnight. It may have been routine maintenance, of course.
Yeah, I think you're right. Bev was saying before that there are issues around Baltimore in particular, and the budgets available to them for maintenance as opposed to, or compared to other cities in the United States. Did that play a factor? Was it maintained to the level it should have been? We know there were construction workers on this bridge. That's not unusual. It happens on these big bridges all around the world, that at night time, when there's fewer traffic on the bridge, then you get construction workers up there carrying out routine maintenance.
Remarkable as well that the emergency responders there were saying that there is still crew on the boat, on the Dali. There's still crew still on the ship. Thank you, Mark. No doubt we will bring you an update on that between now and midday. But up next, Labour say that they will achieve their net zero by 2030, or must they? But just you wait and see how much it's going to cost you with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Can you just let us know if there have been people getting into contact with you as a local councillor about how they feel about every lamppost, which is supposed to be public, neutral territory, being covered in these flags? Has it made some of your constituents nervous to walk the streets?
It's a complete range of people, including people who are from the Bangladeshi Muslim community who support the endeavours of Gaza, of what is going on, and are hostile to the actions of the Israeli government, but feel that they shouldn't have these flags on streets. I thought, if you walk down some of the streets, it doesn't look like a London borough. It looks almost like what you would imagine in Ceausescu's Romania, with flags on every street lamp.
Well, Peter, can you let us know what it's like in the council and their activities in Tower Hamlets? How much time, for example, has been spent discussing issues relating to what's happening in the Middle East? Has it dominated quite a lot of time?
No. Let's be absolutely fair to the mayor and the administration. There's a heck of a lot to do in this council. We have extremes of deprivation and, of course, wealth because of the Canary Wharf City Fringe. We have huge problems on the council. And to be fair, the council spends its time doing council matters. And they said initially, in fact, absolutely carefully at council meetings, we can't interfere with foreign policy, but we got a lot to do on national policy and local policy. Let's concentrate on that.
So there hasn't been too much pressure that you can see from people living in the borough for the council to take a stance?
Members of the council and the administration have put their support. As I've said, we're talking of free speech. They're entitled to do that, but it's what happens where the council is responding to absolutely everybody, all 320,000 people who live in our borough.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. If you're joining us, we are bringing you live pictures this morning from Baltimore. This is the event that happened at 1:30 this morning. The sun has now risen. It is 6:52 in Baltimore, Maryland this morning. An enormous bridge, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, 2.6 kilometres or about 1.5 miles long, was hit by a cargo ship, the Dali. It appears that there might have been a power shortage on that enormous cargo ship, about 300 metres long, that hit the bridge, and the bridge tumbled into the river as though it was made of matchsticks. We are looking at the live pictures now that the sun has risen. We heard just earlier the Maryland governor has declared a state of emergency. Authorities say they're facing a race against time to rescue people in the water amid the freezing temperatures. When we saw that press conference just previously, the chief of the fire department there, James Wallace, described this as being a complete collapse. He said there are multiple casualties. They had removed 2 people from the water. 2 was the only number that they were able to confirm. One of those people, remarkably, Andrew, walked away from this. They must have fallen, presumably from the bridge, perhaps from the ship.
Could have been one of the workers.
Could have been one of the workers, and were able to walk away. They did not need assistance. The other person, seriously injured, been taken to the trauma department locally, and the head of the chief of the fire department said that that person was not in a state to be debriefed, he said, to talk about what might have happened.
And, of course, there's a number of vehicles submerged in the water. They've been picked up by sonar, which were on the bridge. Just have to imagine, Bev, if this hadn't happened at 1:30 a.m., it happened at 1:30 p.m., carnage.
Absolute carnage.
It's a really busy bridge in a really important waterway in Baltimore, 1.5 miles long. It's a monster of a bridge, and it's disintegrated.
That's right, and we're looking at the remains there of the bridge in the daylight as the sun rises here over Maryland. There are apparently multiple marine assets. There are state and local police agencies involved. It's an enormous area to search. The local mayor was saying, Mayor Brandon Scott, very young mayor, 39 years old, a Democrat, and they said there is surface and subsurface rescues commencing at the moment, plus also the deck of the ship that we can see there.
It is like it's like we're watching a disaster movie.
It is. And that's exactly what Mayor Brendan Scott said. He said this looks like something out of a movie.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. And, of course, the reason we've got such great shots, of course, is that a vehicle, a transportation network like that is always monitored by security cameras because it is such an important part of the infrastructure, a huge main arterial road in that area. Right, we're going to bring you that as it breaks. Don't go anywhere. Quick break for the weather. See you in a minute.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some dry weather around today, but also a swathe of rain pushing its way northwards. And this morning we do have some outbreaks of showery rain across parts of Scotland with a bit of sleet or snow over the higher ground. The brightest weather this morning will be across parts of northern England, the Midlands and into East Anglia. But here it is going to turn cloudier as we go through the day, with a bit of rain pushing in as this swathe of rain across southern parts gradually makes its way northwards as we go through the day. Also some outbreaks of rain across parts of Northern Ireland, and temperatures for many of us will be around or a little bit below average for the time of year, especially across parts of Scotland. A bit of a chilly feel here. As we go through the end of the day, the wet weather across much of England will feed further northwards, so a pretty wet end to the day across northern England, and then a wet night for much of Scotland. And as that rain hits the high ground over the Highlands, the Grampians, we are likely to see some further hill snow. Something a bit clearer following in behind, so temperatures taking a bit of a dip, many places falling falling to low to mid single figures. But quite a few places waking up to a bright start on Wednesday, particularly across central parts of England. However, towards western areas, southwestern parts, here we will have some heavy blustery showers. Could have a bit of thunder mixed in with these as they gradually make their way.
It's the final week to see how you could win big. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash that you could spend however you like. Plus, there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 26th of March. This is Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. So it has been a breaking news morning. Baltimore Bridge has collapsed. Bridge in the US city of Baltimore entirely collapsed after being hit by a container ship at 1:30 a.m. this morning local time. We're looking at live pictures here. The operation's underway for at least 7 people, and Baltimore is 4 hours behind us.
There are submerged vehicles in the water too, and the rescue operation will continue. Of course, the water is freezing cold.
And actually, I didn't realise, but the ship, it appears, is still in place. The cargo ship is still there, embedded within the wrought iron collapsed debris from the bridge.
And the crew's still on board too. And, of course, we talked about British farmers bringing chaos to Westminster, where more than 100 tractors came to Parliament over the lack of support from the government.
And toilets training turmoil. That's right, we're going to reveal how many children are turning up to primary school not being able to use the toilet. That's right, 4, 5, 6-year-olds wearing nappies.
Incredible.
Why?
What happened to potty training? And 66 and sexy, that's how the former Secretary of State for Culture, Nadine Dorries, describes herself. She says more and more men find her sexy and desirable. Do you?
Get involved this morning. Let us know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com. We will be taking more live pictures from Baltimore as the sun rises there and the true extent of the damage and the casualties becomes apparent in the morning light.
Is it truly like something you're watching a disaster movie, and there's going to be huge political ramifications, because how can a bridge that's been there since 1977 disintegrate like a matchstick bridge? That's what it was like.
OK, first though, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you, and good morning. The top stories. A state of emergency has been declared in the US city of Baltimore after a bridge collapsed early this morning. If you're watching on TV, you can see this video showing the moment a cargo ship crashed into the bridge. It happened at around 1:30 in the morning. We heard from the fire department moments ago that multiple people were on the bridge at the time. 2 people were recovered from the water. 1 is now in a serious condition. We can take you live now to Baltimore, where it's just after 7 o'clock in the morning. Rescue efforts are continuing. Officials say more than 7 people may still be unaccounted for. The Mayor of Baltimore, Brandon Scott, says now is the time to focus on all those who've been impacted.
This is a unthinkable tragedy. We have to, first and foremost, pray for all of those who are impacted, those families. Pray for our first responders and thank them. All of them working together, city, state, local, to make sure that we are working through this tragedy. This is an ongoing active research that we're having right now. We're going to continue, as you heard from Chief Wallace, throughout. As long as we have to be doing that, we will do it. But we have to be thinking about the families and people impacted.
To other news, the High Court has ruled WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange can appeal against his extradition to the United States. US authorities have been asked to provide assurances on whether Mr. Assange can rely on the First Amendment, which provides a right to free speech, or whether he might face the death penalty. A further hearing will now be held in May. It's over an alleged conspiracy to obtain and disclose national defence information following the publication of leaked documents relating to the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. Britain and the United States are accusing China of carrying out a global campaign of malicious cyber attacks. It's an unprecedented move, with Britain publicly blaming China for targeting the Electoral Commission watchdog and the email accounts of MPs and peers. British intelligence services believe that Chinese spies are likely to use hacked information to target critics of Xi Jinping's government. Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth told GB News a full review of China's relationship with Britain is needed.
We will, in the Labour Party, always prioritise national security and prioritise our democratic integrity. We do believe that we need to continue to keep all of these matters under review. In fact, if we were elected, we would do a full audit of all UK-China relations to fully understand our exposure to China and indeed give certainty to those businesses who trade with China. But we do support what the government announced yesterday, but we would continue to work on a cross-party basis with them to ensure that the right action is taken in response to any threat to our national security.
The UN Security Council has passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. It was passed after the US abstained from voting, a shift in its position on the conflict, which prompted Israel to cancel a meeting in Washington. It comes as the UK airdrops food supplies into Gaza for the first time, part of international efforts to provide life-saving assistance to civilians. The Education Secretary says parents are having to fight for the right to support for children who have special needs. Around 2 in 3 schools for children with special needs in England were at or over capacity in the last academic year. The Department for Education says councils will benefit from an £850 million cash boost. Unions say the plans don't appear to differ from previously announced commitments. But Gillian Keegan says the government's plan will see 60,000 more places made available for students and families.
be more workforce being trained as well, educational psychologists, Senkos, etc. So there's a lot of things in the plan. But this specifically is looking at more places. With the council pressures, we have increased this sort of high needs budget to pay for this part of their budget to 10.5 million. So that's actually gone up 60% in the last 5 years to cope with that increased demand. But we also have 2 programmes to work with councils delivering better value and safety valve.
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, better known as Puff Daddy or P. Diddy, has had 2 of his properties raided by federal agents as part of an ongoing sex trafficking investigation. Properties in Los Angeles and Miami were searched by officers yesterday. It's after accusations made by his former partner, R&B singer Cassandra Ventura, better known as Cassie. The 54-year-old has been the subject of several lawsuits in recent months, including for sexual assault. He's denied all allegations. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
11:07, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Going back to Baltimore, where this extraordinary images have emerged of the bridge collapsing earlier this morning after it was struck by a major cargo ship. Authorities have rescued 2 people from the river. One is in a critical condition. Remarkably, the other one walked away unscathed, even though the drop from the bridge 56 metres.
Unbelievable.
And when you hit the water, it's like hitting concrete.
It really is. The emergency services say they are still looking for at least 7 others, but they expect that number to be revised upwards. Obviously, the sun has now risen there in Baltimore. Mark White joins us in the studio now. These are the images we're looking at here, Mark, from 1:30 this morning. What more do we know now with it being just coming up to 7 o'clock in the morning?
Well, yeah, as you say, absolutely extraordinary images for those that are on radio. It shows the cargo vessel colliding with a column of the bridge and leading to a complete loss of structural integrity, and the whole of that bridge then collapses into the river. And there were vehicles on the bridge at the time. We believe there were a number of construction workers. At the moment, they're putting that figure about 7, but also vehicles in the water. The emergency services have said that they have deployed sonar, and those sonar have been able to detect vehicles that are on the river bed. But it's still, according to the emergency services, an active search and rescue operation, because you can see from on the right of the screen there the daytime images. So although the bridge has collapsed, there's still a lot of the structure of the bridge that's sticking out of the river there, potentially areas that anyone in the river would be able to cling to. So that needs to be properly searched. It's possible as well that somebody may have been taken down the river by the current, come ashore. You just never know. That's the hope anyway, but it's, very cold in that river at the moment. It's not a good prospect for anyone to be in there for length of time.
The sheer scale of this bridge that's so shocking to see it disintegrate so quickly. It carried 11.5 million vehicles every year. A major bridge, 1.5 miles wide, and it just collapsed like a box of matches.
I think we can be thankful for the fact that this accident, if it was an accident, happened at 1:30 in the morning. So it would not have been nearly as busy as it is during the day. But it's still a major highway up through towards Philadelphia, New York and New Jersey. So there certainly would have been multiple vehicles on that 1.5 miles of bridge at that time. So
you say if it was an accident, is one of the questions at the press conference was, could it have been sabotage? I didn't catch the answer of the...
They've said they don't believe so, and they've completely ruled out terrorism as a cause. And I think that will have been because those on board the ship will have radioed the Coast Guard. They spoke the emergency services at that press conference about the fact that the ship's crew were in touch with the Coast Guard. And what we saw as well, and I don't know if we still have that vision, some vision that was taken that speeded up, that shows the cargo vessel, the container ship, heading towards that central column of the bridge, and the lights on the container ship go out a couple of times, which seemed to suggest a power failure on board that container ship. So it would, I think, be very possible that the crew were radioing the Coast Guard saying that they've had a loss of power, that they're drifting towards the bridge. So that would be, I would think, why they've been able to rule out terrorism as a cause at this stage.
Knew that river very well on that bridge.
Yeah, there were two pilots on board. Now, that happens in any stretch where you've got busy shipping lanes. You get what are called pilots. They're trained skippers, effectively. They can take control of the bridge off a ship. They know the river or stretch of water intimately. They know where the sandbanks are, the course that they need to steer to ensure that the ship doesn't run aground, doesn't strike the bridge or whatever other obstacles might be in the way. And they operate this route all of the time. So I think it was always unlikely that it would be some kind of error on the part of the pilots. But I think a power loss does seem to be a logical explanation at this stage.
It's a six-lane bridge, Mark. There are nearly 9 miles of approach roadways coming up to this bridge. If this had happened in the middle of the day, it would have, the death toll would have been significantly higher than we expect it to be.
Well, yeah, if you're talking 1.5 miles of a bridge with 6 lanes, there would have been, without a doubt, hundreds, potentially thousands of vehicles on that bridge at this time. Now, how many were on at 1:30 in the morning? We don't know, but multiple vehicles, they say, they've detected on the riverbed through their sonar. And sadly, because you're plunging from 56 metres, I think you said before, Bev, in terms of the height of this bridge, you're going to smack that river at a very significant impact that may have rendered them unconscious. They might not have been able to get out of the vehicle if it buckled the vehicle itself. They might not have been able to open the doors or the windows. And we don't know how many passengers. You know, was it just a driver in each of the vehicles? You would hope so, maybe at 1:30 in the morning, that you wouldn't be seeing families heading off in a car. But still, multiple vehicles, at least one person in every vehicle.
And multiple casualties.
Yeah, without a doubt. They've described it as a mass casualty event.
Yeah, it's, I mean, looking at this, it looks like a sort of metal bridge, but apparently it's a reinforced concrete arch bridge. There will be a huge amount of clear-up as well to do, Mark, in terms of retrieving any of the debris from the Potomac River itself.
Yes, indeed. It's a truss bridge, which, you know, there are numbers of them around the world. Notable examples, the Fourth Whale Bridge in Scotland and the Quebec Bridge in Canada. The Quebec Bridge, incidentally, did suffer a partial collapse a few years back as well. So whether that does point to a sort of an inherent weakness in this design, certainly, you know, clearly there's a weakness in the fact that we know that this container ship is a massive ship, 300 metres long. And because all these containers were on board, it would have had a very significant tonnage. So that's a huge impact on the central column. It obviously demolished or badly damaged that central column. But to bring the whole 1.5 metres at sea, 1.5 miles off this truss bridge down is just incredible.
Actually, the White House has just put out a statement saying there is no evidence of any nefarious intent. So it clearly does look like your theory, Mark, that there was some catastrophic power failure on the ship.
Yeah, that is incredible footage. We're looking out for those on radio. We just will explain that on the right of our screen, showing the container ship there with part of that bridge still collapsed onto the superstructure of that container ship. There were 22 crew members on board the container ship as it was drifting towards that bridge at the time.
Chock-a-block with containers. I mean, it must have packed quite a punch.
Yeah, and the container ship has been damaged. Whether it sustained damage of any significance to the hull, we don't know, but that would be another issue. And of course, while this bridge has collapsed right across this river, that's going to make the journeys in and out of what is a massive container port in Baltimore impossible. for the foreseeable. So that's going to have a very significant impact, clearly, on the traffic that use this container port. They're going to have to reroute to other ports in the region.
That's going to have all sorts of knock-on effects, isn't it, on trade and shipping food and all sorts. Extraordinary. Again, I've said it before, it just was like watching a disaster movie. You couldn't really believe it. It's jaw-dropping.
These are fascinating daytime images. I say the first proper sort of it's obviously taken on board a boat. It's a bit shaky at times, but that gives you an indication. At one end, there appears to be part of the bridge that's still standing, but I think most of the superstructure of that bridge is clearly gone.
Helicopters circling in the sky now, of course, looking, I imagine, for debris and also
and for survivors. But I mean, what hope, Mark? Because the temperature, I think you alluded to, was 9 degrees Celsius. They've been in the water for hours.
Within minutes at 9 degrees Celsius, you're going to start to suffer hypothermia. And then it's very difficult to really do anything meaningful. You lose all grip and strength when you're in very cold water. So actually being able to swim and hold on to something would be very difficult in itself. The hope is that there are parts of the superstructure still above the water level there, that maybe people have been able to get to them and clamber on board. But so far, we know of 2 survivors. One person who remarkably wasn't injured badly at all and declined medical attention.
Has got to tell, because they can recount what happened, how they. When you hit the water, you imagine it's like hitting a brick wall at that height, 56 metres.
Absolutely. And another person, because they did hit the water at 56 metres, are in a very serious condition in hospital.
So we've got a statement from the White House now this morning, and that reads, "Our hearts go out to families of the missing." The White House says it is closely monitoring the situation. Its hearts go out to the families of those who are missing, they say, after the horrific incident. In a statement, they've said the US Coast Guard is conducting search and rescue for those who remain unaccounted for as a result of the bridge collapse. Senior White House officials are in touch with the governor and the mayor to offer any federal assistance they need, and there is no indication of any nefarious intent. I mean, we're looking at the image here, Mark, of... I mean, it genuinely is like something out of a movie where you see, the road bending off to the right, and then clearly that would have continued on over the bridge, and it is just a sheer drop.
Yeah, and that gives an indication, as you were saying. That's taken from quite a distance, but you can see that is a 6-lane road, 3 lanes on each side, and it's rising up, as you say, to the point where it would have... Because these bridges have to allow very big vessels to get underneath, it has to rise up 56 metres above the river to allow that to happen. So that's what's happened, but it's no distance at all, really, out into the river, and that collapse has happened.
So if you are just joining us this morning, let us bring you up to speed with what has been happening. 1:30 a.m. local time in Baltimore. They're 4 hours behind us here. The Francis Scott Key Bridge going over the River Patapsco in Maryland, in Baltimore in Maryland, collapsed. It was hit by a ship, wasn't it, Mark? What do we know about the ship?
What was it carrying?
It's a container ship, so it was carrying lots of containers. What was inside them, we don't know, but it was a Singapore flag vessel. So we're told that the Singapore Maritime and Port Authority is now in contact and liaising with the US Coast Guard to offer whatever advice and assistance they can. The crew, we believe, are still aboard this vessel at this time.
So we're looking, this is fresh pictures here, Mark. So this is the aerial shot. We can see the ship still there, the Dali, as you say, the Singaporean cargo ship still wedged within the remaining metalwork of the bridge. And I think that must be the north side of the bridge, which is intact, perhaps, and this is the south side. I'm afraid my geography knowledge of the Baltimore Harbour isn't entirely
yeah, you and me both.
But we can see where it's hit the bridge, and it almost has taken it down almost halfway along, perhaps a little bit more in one direction. One section still standing and the rest of it just in pieces, like it has just been snapped into 6 or 7 large sections.
Yeah, one end, it looks about maybe 100 metres or so of the bridge is still intact, but the rest of it, from what we can see in these images, is completely gone. That's the bow of this container ship with the superstructure of this bridge collapsed and split in two on top of the bow of the container ship. What damage to the container ship itself, the superstructure of the ship and the hull is, we don't know, because that is obviously going to factor into what the rescue services do as well about removing that container ship. If it has been compromised in terms of the hull, it potentially could be in danger of sinking.
And again, no investigators have gone on board yet because they're still not clear how safe it is. Of course, the crew are still on board.
Look at that shot now as it's widening out. You can see actually that a very significant part of the bridge has indeed collapsed. You've got 100 metres or so either side that it seems, you know, the roadway is still intact, and then it just shears off. That main section, the bulk of the bridge over the river, has just gone, collapsed straight into that river itself.
The search and rescue is underway. We heard earlier a press conference from James Wallace, the chief of the local fire department there, and he was saying how there are multiple agencies involved in the rescue effort, multiple marine assets, state, local police agencies. I think we're going to cross live now to Baltimore for an update.
And we know there were individuals on the bridge at the time of the collapse working on the bridge, contractors for us. Our partners from the U.S. Coast Guard will provide some more information momentarily. In terms of traffic, drivers should avoid I-695 Southeast Corridor and use I-95 and I-895 as alternatives. I-695 is being detoured southbound at exit 43, the Peninsula Expressway, and northbound at exit 2, Route 10. Vessel traffic into and out of the Port of Baltimore is suspended until further notice, but the port is still open for truck transactions. Obviously, we're very thankful for the first responders who are carrying out their efforts in these rescues, and that they're doing this all through the night and today, and we're praying obviously for everyone's safe return. We'll continue to provide updates to you, the next one being approximately 9:30. With that, I will turn it over to Lieutenant Colonel Palmer from the U.S. Coast Guard.
Good morning. My name is Lieutenant Commander Aaron Palmer from Coast Guard Sector Maryland National Capital Region. I'm the current acting Chief of Response for the sector. The Coast Guard's primary mission right now is search and rescue, looking for any survivors in the water. On scene, we currently have 3 small boats. We also have Coast Guard Cutter Mako, an 87-foot patrol boat. We have a helicopter from Air Station Atlantic City, and we're working with numerous federal, state, and local partners on scene on these search and rescue efforts. Thank you.
You going to take any questions after this time?
What role is the FBI playing in the investigation at this point?
FBI has basically to see if there's any terrorism connection, which there is not.
Any confirmed deaths?
No confirmed fatalities.
Any recovered from the water alive?
That's still under, still the rescue mission is still active.
Do you have any sense of what happened to the actual cargo ship? There were some reports that it suffered some major power outages just before it crashed into the bridge.
Too early in the investigation.
Was a pilot operating the ship coming in and out of the port? Was it a port's authorized pilot, or was it the captain of the ship?
No, the pilots move ships in and out of the Port of Baltimore.
What's happening?
Pilots move ships in and out of Baltimore.
What's happening to all the other ships that are waiting the backup at this point? How are you navigating that?
Basically, we're communicating with them. They obviously understand the situation, and we'll deal with the logistics of that later.
Has the crew been evacuated from the ship, and has the Coast Guard been able to make contact with the pilot on the ship?
That's all being done right now. I don't know the exact details of where they all are, but yes, obviously we're contacting them.
Is this being investigated as suspicious?
FBI, in any type of incident like this, the FBI would be engaged just to make sure, and that's what they did.
And you have an idea how many vehicles are in the water?
Can you just any idea how could this happen? This bridge
Too early.
should not have collapse like this?
Too early investigation.
How long will the port be closed? Do you know how deep the water is there in sort of this area where it happened, the conditions?
Approximately 50 feet. 50 feet.
How many people are you looking for right now?
How many people were rescued? How many were pulled from the water? How many are still searching for?
That is what we're doing. We're basically searching for everyone that was potentially on the bridge. As you can imagine, it's the middle of the night. You know, what type of traffic was there? How many workers were there? Workers, they obviously come to a project, but other workers show up sometimes. So that's what we're investigating right now.
Is this unprecedented? Is it anything like this ever happened?
Not in Baltimore.
Sir, can you talk more about the workers on the bridge, what was going on, and how many vehicles you think might actually be in the water?
They were basically doing some concrete deck repair. We don't have the number of the vehicles.
Do we know who they work for?
I don't have that right offhand.
How long will the port be closed? Any estimate?
Too early to determine.
Are you still looking for 7 people?
A number of people. That's the one number that we've had, but obviously we're researching to see if anyone else was on that bridge.
Can you speak to some of the challenges, the freezing water, the current, the darkness this morning as you were searching for individuals?
All of the above, to be frank. It's, a very, very tough situation. 1 a.m. in the morning. Very little information at the time. It happened instantaneously, as you've seen.
Sir, it's been a number of hours at this point. What can you tell family members who might be watching about any hope that you will still recover survivors?
We actually have set up a facility for any family members. We have mental health professionals there as well, so we are dealing with that.
And are you ruling out any kind of intentional motive?
We don't see anything that relates to that at this time. It's an open investigation, but there's nothing that points to that in any direction.
First calls after the incident come in directly from the ship. When the ship hit there, who were the first ones to make the 911 calls to kind of alert you?
I don't know. I don't have that information.
Do you have any indication whether the ship lost power?
It's too early.
Just for clarification,
I'm sorry.
last question, please. Port is closed except for trucks moving transport out.
Right.
Okay.
And we'll be back. We'll be back surely about 9:30. I'm sorry.
This bridge is built in the 19th. It took about 5 years to construct it, right? Any idea what we can expect moving forward? I mean, the bridge is...
Too early. Obviously, we reached out to a number of engineering companies, and so obviously we have a long road in front of us to get to that point. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can you tell us where the family members are supposed to meet up?
So we don't know the name of that gentleman, but
No.
he's clearly one of the chief investigators of this unfolding situation. I did like his rather curt manner.
Taciturn
Taciturn, at least.
Understatement.
Paul Weiderfeld, Transportation Secretary, I'm being told, in Maryland. Mark, as he said there, his answer to most of the questions was too early to know.
And of course
But he did give some important information, I think, with regard to who was on the bridge in terms of those we think that ended up in the water. They're talking about 7. He's saying that those were construction workers who were involved in concrete repairs or resurfacing activities on the bridge itself. He also said that, there was a number of those construction workers on, but what they don't know is sometimes you get other construction workers that show up, that take over at certain points. So there's still to bottom out exactly how many were on the bridge at that time, and therefore how many potentially ended up in the water. The other question of significance that was asked is how many vehicles were on the bridge at this time in the morning. He doesn't know. They don't know as yet. But we do know from the earlier news conference that the sonar that have been brought in by the emergency services, the marine units who are searching that area, have detected vehicles on the bottom of the river, on the river bed. We heard from the Coast Guard there, the Coast Guard spokeswoman, who said that there are 3 Coast Guard small boats and a Coast Guard cutter that are involved, a larger cutter vessel that are involved along with the Coast Guard helicopter. So that's their assets, but add to that police marine units, fire service marine units, not just from the Baltimore area, but from surrounding counties, because mutual aid has been called in.
And she did say they're still looking for survivors.
It's still very much an active search and rescue, even though hope with every minute that passes has got to diminish.
We're looking at the live pictures here as the sun rises over the river Patapsco. And what occurs to me, Mark, as I'm looking at this, is actually that's a very dangerous area to conduct a search and rescue in. We have no idea about the stability of the remaining trusses, which are still there existing from the bridge. I wouldn't want to be in a lifeguard, Coast Guard boat driving amongst that, so they will have to take that into consideration.
You're 100% right, and the Patapsco River as well. It's a huge river. It's a tidal river. So, and I think they were saying before, about an hour ago, the tide was changing. So tide is coming back in again. Every time you've got tidal flows, that's an extra hazard for those crews who are working down there in amongst some pretty precarious wreckage that is now over that cargo vessel that is now in the water as well. So they're working in and around that, dealing with the natural flow combined with the tidal flow of the river in very cold and unpredictable conditions, so very dangerous.
And we can see some very small boats nearby, whether they are part of the search and rescue or the recovery operation, or are they media, or are they people just having a nose?
There will be a media exclusion zone, without a doubt. I would imagine that the media are not going to be allowed anywhere near on the water. The activities that are going on there, which is why you've got the media helicopters, which are providing these invaluable shots that can show us that the bridge on the far side of each bank is intact for about 100 metres or so from the river bank, but then that big central section of the bridge is completely collapsed onto the container ship and onto the river itself. Some of the superstructure of the bridge still visible above the river itself, but lots of the boats there will indeed be the Coast Guard and police, marine and fire marine rescue vessels that are in the area with the dive teams. So there are dive teams that will be going down. I don't know how deep the Patapsco River is, but I would imagine it's quite a deep river because it's a huge container port. You've got very big vessels going in and out, so there needs to be significant room for the draft of these vessels so as not to run aground.
Funny, isn't it?
It will be deep.
We've been talking...
I'm just looking here. The river cuts a gorge to 200 feet.
200 feet.
We've been talking so much about cyber attacks and the impact that technological shortages or outages can cause. We heard there, as we said, from one of the chief investigators, and he was asked, could there be a terrorism connection? He said no. He said the FBI were involved in looking at it. But he did then almost slightly backtrack and say it's an open investigation and it's too early to say. But why might that be something to look into, Mark, in terms of what happened to the power on this ship?
I think you make a very good point about the vulnerability of modern infrastructure and technology now to hacking and cyber attacks. There's no, we must add, no indication that that's what's happened here, but it is a vulnerability in systems from power stations to, big hospital complexes, to vessels and other traffic that use the roads, shipping lanes, the railways. They're open potentially not just to hacking but just to technical faults. Clearly, at the very least, there's been some kind of technical issue with this container ship where we saw from other footage, and I don't know if we still have that available now, there was speeded up footage at night time where you could see the container ship losing its lights on 2 occasions as it was drifting towards that bridge, getting ever closer to the bridge. The lights were going out, and that's why people are now inferring that there was a power loss on at least a couple of occasions. Here we can see that footage now. For our radio listeners, we'll just describe it to you. It's actually nighttime footage that has been speeded up. And looking at the cargo vessel now, the lights were out, they've just gone back on, and then in a second or two again, the lights go out on the container ship again, and that's it, they've just gone out again. So at those moments when the ship is without power, it is therefore without propulsion. And if you don't have propulsion, you have no means of accurately steering the vessel, so you are at the mercy of the tidal flow of that river. And if that's pushing you towards a central column on that bridge, there's nothing you can do about it.
Just the multiple vehicles which were on the bridge, one of them was the size of a tractor trailer.
The amazing thing for me, in fact,
Straight
was
to the
that,
bottom.
as we saw then from that latest press conference with the Coast Guard there, no confirmed fatalities. No confirmed fatalities. We would expect that to change, you would imagine, as the day goes on here in GB News. But that's quite extraordinary, Mark.
I don't think it is too extraordinary in the sense that the fatalities will have drowned.
Come later.
They'll be at the bottom of the river.
They're in those
or
vehicles.
the bodies will have floated down the river. So
it's a 39-mile long river.
Exactly. That probably explains why we're not seeing bodies. We got one person pulled from the water who was seriously injured.
And one
but
person
the others,
walked out of the water.
Very, very lucky indeed. But I think if they're in vehicles, they're sadly potentially at the bottom of the river.
I'd also presumed that the people on the cargo ship, the crew of that ship, might have been more badly affected. But when we're looking at these pictures here, it could be that there aren't any human casualties.
Because it's just the bow, isn't it? And you wouldn't expect crew to be at that point on the
At 1:30 in the morning, the crew would have been in the wheelhouse, down in the engine room, places like that. On a container ship, anyway, you don't
just set off on its journey.
You don't tend to get people wandering about on the upper decks of a container ship because all of the available space there is packed out with containers. What we're told is there were 22 crew members on board and they are in the process of evacuating the crew from that container ship now.
All right.
And it looks a very dangerous structure.
It does. We're going to be bringing you the latest on this breaking story all day here on GB News, but don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Tubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
You think this country needs new gas power stations. Apparently, this will all be about trying to get some form of energy security. Rishi Sunak has upset people today with this suggestion, people saying that actually this would do more damage to climate change than it would do good. Where are you on it, Richard?
I'll tell you exactly where. We need a lot more gas power stations and nuclear power stations because quite often the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Last week, we imported 16% of all our electricity because we haven't got enough capacity in the UK and we're now totally over-reliant on renewables.
The part of the problem is the lack of storage capacity, which the government has finally got round to addressing. I think this as backup is actually quite a sensible idea. But they are not doing anything, as far as I can tell. At the moment, it will be retrofitted to have storage capability, which seems to be utterly bonkers. I mean, anyone who's got solar panels, you know very well you're storing up energy. So it's about storage as much as production. They could have gone, 20 years ago, we could have had nuclear power. We could have done more. We haven't looked far enough ahead in the future, and we are in grave danger of making the same mistake. I mean, the other side of this is what is the difference going to be? Blackouts are, they're irritating and...
Irritating? It'd be disastrous. It would destroy our economy.
Well, they would be now, but, some of us remember 3-day weeks and things like that. And in fact, I grew up thinking that everybody had, at least a couple of days a week when they had to eat off a primer stove and things.
This is, again, I don't want to harp on, but this is one of the problems in the politics in our country, isn't it? So many politicians, they just think in election cycles. Absolutely. They just think, what can I do and say to get my own backside re-elected at the next general election? They're not always looking ahead. Actually, politics aside, what is genuinely the best thing for this country?
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria Di Piero. This is GB News.
Britain's election channel.
It's 11:40. Well, you're with Britain's News when GB News, Andrew Pearson. But Turner, these remarkable images from Baltimore has really stirred you at home. Neil sent in a message saying, I would liken this collapse to the Ronan Point building collapse in London, which was caused by a relatively small gas explosion in 1968. A catastrophic impact on one part of the bridge has caused what's called a progressive collapse of the entire structure. The damage is disproportionate because of the interdependence of the elements of the structure. Structural design rules were changed in the UK following Ronan Point to avoid this type of catastrophe. We should get you on, Neil. You know, we seem to know quite a lot about this. Because it is a fascinating engineering point of view. How can a bridge that's been there since 1977 just fold like that?
Steve has said, good morning, Steve, it can be seen that the ship suffered a blackout shortly before the collision. And he says merchant vessels, whilst leaving or entering a port, are legally obliged to run 2 or more electrical generators just in case one fails. Something has gone badly wrong here.
Because we saw the lights seem to go out twice.
That's right.
They go out, back on, and then out again, and once just before impact and once around the time of it. So that's going to be the key to all of this. What happened on that ship? What went so badly wrong?
We're watching the live images here. It's hard to see... Mark White has joined us back in the studio. It's hard to tell whether this is on a vessel that is moving or that is the speed of the river. Because as you said, it is tidal. Yeah. That is going to make the rescue operation very difficult.
It will indeed. And Andrew made a fascinating point just a few minutes ago about the fact that they will be searching for people up and down this river because there is the natural flow of the river out to sea, but there's also the tide to take into consideration as well. So in addition to the boats that we're seeing there around the superstructure of that bridge, there will be searches that are going on in the river itself, further down the river and up the river, depending on the tidal situation, and on the river banks on both sides, looking for the potential for people that were swept down the river and off to the banks.
They think they're looking for 7. But it could be a lot more.
Well, this
was
even more difficult. We know there was a construction crew that were relaying concrete on the bridge. But what one of the main investigators said there is that, you know, these crews are often supplemented at times during the night, so they don't know whether other individuals got onto the bridge that have been unaccounted for, that they don't know about at this stage. And then there's the other issue, which is, you know, the great unknown at this stage, is how many vehicles were on this bridge. You mentioned before, Andrew, 11 million vehicles a year use this bridge. That gives you an indication of just what a phenomenally busy bridge this is. Because
6 lanes.
It's one of the main highways up to Philadelphia, New York and New Jersey. And even at 1:30 in the morning, there will have been multiple vehicles, without a doubt, on this bridge. How many, though, is, as I say, unknown at this stage. But the marine rescue units that are on scene, some of them have sonar. They have been, according to the rescue services, been able to detect vehicles on the bottom of the river at this stage. But clearly, anybody inside now, I think there's very little hope that they would be found alive inside a vehicle.
So difficult for families of people who may have been working on that bridge, or wonder if somebody they know and love was driving over that bridge.
I think the one hope, obviously, is that the vehicles that were on the bridge may be limited to just one person in the vehicle, a driver, because 1:30 in the morning, it's not necessarily the type of day you would expect a family outing or a school bus or something like that going up there. So. But at least one person in each vehicle, with obviously driving the vehicle.
We've seen a couple of press conferences this morning. If you're just joining us, earlier on we heard from the chief of the fire department in Baltimore, James Wallace. He described this as a complete collapse of the bridge. He said there were multiple casualties, that they had removed 2 people from the water. One of them seriously injured, one of them able to walk away, astonishingly. That there are multiple marine assets at work here in this picture. This is actually the footage we're seeing, obviously, from 1:30 this morning when the bridge collapsed for the first time. And the state and local police agencies have been working very hard since 1:30 in the morning. They said there's a very large area to search. There are surface investigations and subsurface investigations, and also that they were also looking at the deck of the ship, because of course it could be that there are cars which fell from the bridge onto the deck of the ship. We heard from the mayor there, Brandon Scott, 39 years old, a Democrat mayor. He was very keen to point out that at this stage all of the focus should be on the humanity of the people affected. He was at pains to say, when asked questions such as, how long will it be until the bridge is rebuilt?
Extraordinary question.
It is extraordinary. I guess what that question is pointing towards is the enormous disruption that an event like this will cause to that region, Mark. A very busy harbour, busy arterial roads connecting major cities.
Yeah, and they've suspended all port traffic for the duration.
Yes,
because that could be the case for days.
Because the bigger vessels, the only way under the bridge is the central section, which is the highest section, 56 metres above the river, which allows enough clearance for a large container ship like this to get under. Either side, the bits of the bridge that are still intact, they're too low level. You can't get the bigger ships under them. And actually, the riverbank's probably a bit shallower at that point as well.
There are some pictures emerging, actually, of cars which are being found on the riverbanks. We will bring you those if we can. But still to come this morning, we're going to bring you the latest from that situation in Baltimore. A bridge 6 times the length of the Severn Bridge collapsed after being hit by a cargo ship. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest forecast for GB News from the Met Office. Some places will get away with a dry day today, but many others will see another spell of heavy and persistent rainfall with snow for upland parts of Scotland. We've got low pressure centred across southwestern parts, a few showers still going in the far southwest as well as for parts of Wales. Also showers into the northeast of Scotland for a time, with these falling as snow over the hills. But it turns increasingly damp across Northern Ireland, into the Midlands and the southeast by the middle of the afternoon. The rain persistent, and it's going to feel quite cold under that wet weather. And it's going to be a cold day for Scotland and Northern England, with temperatures in the mid to high single figures. With that cold air in place then, the rain moves north into much of Northern England, North Wales, through the Midlands, East Anglia. And then as it reaches southern and central Scotland, it will be falling as snow above 200 or 300 metres, settling with a few centimetres over hills and mountains. It's going to feel cold in the north. Further south, temperatures down to 5 or 6 first thing. Some clear spells, but a wet start for many, especially for Northern Ireland, into much of Scotland as well. And then another band of rain sweeps through southwestern parts as well as Wales, turning to showers as the day goes on. And these showers will be lively. Hail, thunder, gusty winds as well. In between, some brighter interludes, but it will continue to feel on the cold side.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Interesting a text in here from Ian who says, "Hi, I've been over that bridge when I worked near Baltimore. You mentioned that you were surprised a bridge collapsed like that. The US has a problem with the structural integrity of many bridges across the country because of lack of maintenance over the years. I'm absolutely convinced this is why this is going to become an incredibly political story in the end, Mark, because if there's issues over maintenance and cutting corners, there'll be a very big political price to pay because this is going to cause huge economic damage to this state."
Yeah, I mean, at some point when they get
apart from the loss of life.
Yeah, when they get to examining the structural integrity of that bridge and whether there were weak points, you're right. If it is shown that actually there are some real inherent weaknesses in the design, the maintenance of this bridge, then there could be some very serious fallout from that. We're nowhere near that stage at the moment. We're still very much in an active search and rescue scenario. I think one of the interesting things for me is what kind of state this container ship is in.
Yeah.
Because you were mentioning to me just during the break, Andrew, that it was probably around about 95 to 100,000 tons.
I mean,
massively heavy ship.
What a punch!
300
that
metres
packs.
long, striking a concrete superstructure that's embedded to the riverbed. Will have damaged the hull of this vessel, without a doubt. It may well have, some kind of watertight integrity at the moment as it's pushed against the column of the bridge.
Which
but
could
when
be
they
keeping
try
it
to
up.
remove it,
Yeah.
what happens to the ship then?
Yeah, they'll have to have so many tugs to tow it in case it sinks.
Well, one of our viewers, William, good morning, William, has said, where were the escort tugs? Normally a vessel of that size would have a tug at the front and one at the back, specifically for this type of emergency.
Well, maybe they were at the beginning of the
You do
voyage.
often get that in and out of port.
Yeah.
You'll get tugs that help ships because they help them manoeuvre in and out of the tight spaces that they berth in a port. So that you'll always see tugs on hand to do that. But once they're under their own steam, the tugs are away and it's heading down a main river channel. So you've got pilots on board who are skippers effectively with local knowledge who take over the controls of the vessel while it's in the river, because it's not just avoiding the bridge, or at least the columns on the bridge, but any river channel is going to have sort of deeper and shallower parts where there may be sandbanks and things like that. So they know the channels, they know where to position the vessel. It's unlikely, I think, to have been any kind of issue, it seems, in terms of the pilot, not realising he was going into the column of a bridge.
Sure.
But I think the images that have shown this vessel with the power failing twice, it seems, with the lights going out. But then again, one of your viewers who emailed in, I thought was fascinating. I didn't know this, but he said that normally these big vessels would have two independent power supplies so that if one goes down, another can be immediately swung into action when you're in those critical stages of entering and leaving port.
It's extraordinary that if that's the case, that both failed.
Well, if that's what happened, certainly. Or did it actually get underway with only one power supply, which, if that email is correct, then that may well have been an infringement.
We've come to the end of our show for this morning. We'll be handing you over to the very capable hands of Tom and Emily. No doubt Mark will be here as well for the remainder of the afternoon. We will see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.
That's right, Bev. We'll have continued coverage of the shocking scenes in Baltimore and asking the question, how precisely did this happen? Could it happen here?
And closer to home, the UK Border Force at Manchester Airport have been accused of anti-Semitism. The Home Office have opened an investigation. This after 2 Israeli victims or near victims of the Hamas attacks accuse them of anti-Semitism.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest forecast for GB News from the Met Office. Some places will get away with a dry day today, but many others will see another spell of heavy and persistent rainfall with snow for upland parts of Scotland. We've got low pressure centred across southwestern parts, a few showers still going in the far southwest as well as for parts of Wales. Also showers into the northeast of Scotland for a time, with these falling as snow over the hills. But it turns increasingly damp across Northern Ireland, into the Midlands and the southeast by the middle of the afternoon. The rain persistent and it's going to feel quite cold under that wet weather. And it's going to be a cold day for Scotland and Northern England with temperatures in the mid to high single figures. With that cold air in place then, the rain moves north into much of Northern England, North Wales, through the Midlands, East Anglia. And then as it reaches southern and central Scotland, it will be falling as snow above 200 or 300 metres, settling with a few centimetres over hills and mountains. It's going to feel cold in the north. Further south, temperatures down to 5 or 6 first thing. Some clear spells, but a wet start for many, especially for Northern Ireland, into much of Scotland as well. And then another band of rain sweeps through southwestern parts as well as Wales, turning to showers as the day goes on. And these showers will be lively. Hail, thunder, gusty winds as well. In between, some brighter interludes, but it will continue to feel on the cold side.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be a winner just like Phil?
Obviously, whoever wins it next is going to be as happy as I was, and they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
Enter our massive spring giveaway. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats, and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.